So, good afternoon and good morning, wherever you're watching this from. It's wonderful to be able to welcome you here today to our penultimate and one of our final sessions of the year as part of our PA Forum program. And we've got a cracker for you today. Excuse the Christmas pun.
Oi.
But we are going to be bringing back Nick Elston, who's done a whole program of sessions for us, specifically focusing around the health and wellness piece for our members this year. It's our third year working with Nick, and we're excited that he's going to be back with us again next year. And we have an amazing guest with us who we all know, or hopefully, if you don't know, you're going to get to find out loads of information about today. The amazing Lucy Brazier OBE from Executive Support Media. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lucy now for nearly 10 years. And every time I spend time with her, it's incredibly motivating, incredibly inspiring. She's huge within our profession, and she's supported us at our annual conference. If you've seen her, she's done a number of webinars with us. And I think today's topic is really poignant because it's all about the evolution of the PAEA role. And every time we speak to Lucy, there's always something going on, something new, and always lots of information to share. So I'd like to welcome Nick and Lucy and just say a massive thank you to us for your continued support to PA Forum. We love working with you, and thank you so much for supporting us every year, year after year. We love it. Thank you.
You are very welcome, Dan.
Always wonderful working with you. You ask, we always say yes. And that's because it's always such a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction, Dan. And I'll, of course, allow Lucy to reintroduce herself, as it will probably be the case very shortly. So welcome to the final session of 2024. Like, genuinely, where the hell's this year gone? It's crazy how it's flown by. But we are talking about the evolving role. And of course, when I was thinking about the content for this final session, I could think no further than my lovely guest today, that there was no other options. This was the option. And I'm so pleased I managed to secure some of her valuable time. So for those I haven't met yet, my name is Nick Elston. I'm also the wellbeing kind of session lead for the PA Forum for this year, and very excited to say for next year as well. So looking forward to that. I am a professional speaker by trade, working in the mental health space. I'm also a transformational speaking coach, and the sessions that I run are all around giving people a real four-dimensional human experience approach to the topics that we cover. And again, that's why today it's such a great fit, because conversationally, myself and Lucy have had many great conversations throughout the times we've met each other. We also both work in lots of different spaces as well. And of course, you do as well. My business is called Forging People, and it came from a line in one of my early talks that in life we can either allow our adversities and our challenges and all the stuff that we experience to negatively impact us for the rest of our days, or maybe we can choose these things to forge something better, forge something beautiful, forge something powerful, something that wouldn't have existed without you going through your stuff in the first place. And to me, that's where it all makes sense. To some, to many, this year has been tough. So again, having this session in December is great timing, so we can kind of regroup for 2025. And as always, that the experiences and the insights that I share are based on lived experience. I surround myself with amazing solution-focused people such as Lucy, because ethically, morally, and for insurance purposes, I'm not the guy to tackle everything. Also, if I ever release my first country music album, this is going to be the cover as well. But there we go. That's a whole different story. I'm not going to go down. So I am very delighted to welcome Lucy to today's session. Lucy, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody, please?
So I would love to. Thank you very much, Nick. So most of you know that I am very, very involved in the administrative professional space globally. I am the founder and CEO of Executive Support Media. We publish Executive Support magazine. We put on all sorts of events and trainings and things all over the world. But that's only kind of part of the story. Somewhere along the line, I became somewhat of an advocate for you all. I spend an enormous amount of my time now in companies helping them to restructure their administrative functions and talking to your executives and your HR teams about how they use administrative functions to make sure that the business is operating properly and that they're getting the most out of you. And I got awarded the OBE in 2021 for services to office professionals. And very excitingly, this year, my book, which published in September last year, was awarded the International Book Award Career Book of the Year, which excites me for all sorts of reasons. reasons, but particularly because, I don't feel that it's a job anymore. It's very much a career for the 500 million people that work in it, 90% of whom are women. So that's probably quite a good place to start, is it, Nick?
It's a really good place to start. The challenge for us will be keeping it to 40 minutes because
Oh, yeah.
we
I
both
read
speak
your
professional.
questions. I was like, well, each of those is probably a full day course, but yes, I shall do my best.
So the overarching aim of both of our roles here today, I'm going to act as host, Lucy as my guest specialist, my guest expert, and we're going to cover just 7 topics I've kind of picked off the top of my head, which I feel are relevant to your space. But after 14 minutes, we'll come back to the room. So you've got that 15 minutes to ask any questions that you want. I cannot see the chat box right now, so Dan's very kindly offering to facilitate that for us. So let's just dive in, shall we? I wanted to start with being able to master influence, Lucy, because I think I read it earlier on that 2025 will be the year of the thought leader, and now more than ever, stepping into that space of influence is really crucial in all sectors. But as a PAVAEA, why is it important to master the art of influence?
No, I think you're correct. I think we've got a whole heap of thought leaders. And I think for the assistant, it's important to understand that you are the subject matter expert in what it is that you do. I think very often we see assistants as helpers or support or sitting somewhat outside of the business rather than sitting next to their executives and really understanding what's going on. And I think that all kind of boils down to understanding what the role is in the first place. And when I ask assistants why they're employed by their companies, very often they just sit there and blink at me. And actually the same is true when I say to HR, well, why do you employ administrative professionals? Or you say to executives. And it's kind of, well, they're there to do the things I don't want to do and to do the bits and pieces and to fill the gaps. And nothing could be further from the truth. The organisation employs you to give your executive back time. So really, you have your speciality, which is the administrative piece, and your executive is employed to do the things that they are the only ones that they can do. That's why they're paid their massive salaries. So simple economics says that if both of you are capable of doing something, it should be you that is doing it, so that your executive is freed up to do their piece. And I think once the organisation starts to understand that just like somebody who works in finance is an expert in finance, and someone who works in marketing is an expert in marketing, you are the expert in administration. And there are skills that you have that nobody else in the business has, particularly when it comes to implementation and process and procedure. When I do psychometric testing on assistants, there's one particular strand where a high score in that psychometric testing is between 12 and 15. And regularly when I test assistants, they're coming in between 20 and 30. So to me, that piece, which is taking ideas and turning into reality and is putting process and systems and ways that things will work better into place is hugely helpful. And I have to say to you, I'll give you a really good example of that. When I run my course, one of the exercises is, once we've done a whole load of business strategy, to go away and to look at a process which they know, or the assistants know, isn't working. And I know what happens. You look at these processes and you think, oh gosh, there's got to be a better way of doing that. That's taking so much time. And then you think, well, I'm sure somebody's thought it through. So I'm not really confident enough to raise my hand and say, I think that could be done a different way. Nobody's thought it through. That's the secret I'm going to let you in, at least not for many, many, many years. So here's the time for you to raise your hand and say there's a different way of doing it. And when you do, it has enormous impact. There was a woman earlier on this year who, when we did that exercise, went away and came back and she said, okay, she was working with a company that part of the role was to manage buildings. And she said, I have been saying forever that we need a database because right the way across America, we manage nearly 500 buildings. And every time something goes wrong with them, I'm having to pick up the phone and find local people who will be able to fix that. And I said, okay, so how many hours do you think you spend a day doing that? And she said, well, between 3 and 4. And I said, okay, 4 hours a day wasted. How many people are doing this role? Nearly 2,000. Oh, that's 16 million across the year. when you work it out. $16 million when you worked out their salaries and how much time it was going to save. So sometimes, if you're wondering whether you're influential or not, just putting into action the simplifying of a process can save huge amounts of money. And I think these days influence isn't about, leadership isn't about authority, it's about this influence piece. And to me, as long as you understand what your role is, you understand what your strengths are, you understand you're a subject matter expert in your own skill set, and that skill set has huge return on investment when it's done properly, hopefully it elevates the role hugely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, one of the conversations, actually a few of the conversations I had when I first joined the PA Forum, it's my first experience of working in the assistant space. This was kind of maybe pre-COVID or just around the COVID time. And the conversations I was having, quite interestingly, that people kind of fell into the role, whether that be by accident or kind of through transition. But more and more now, the conversations I have at the conferences that we're attending and speaking at, there are people that are intentionally building a proactive career through this role. What can you share with us to kind of enhance that career progression path for the people that are here today?
Oh, Nick, it drives me a bit crazy, really, that it's still seen as a job. Because when I start my conferences, one of the first things I do is to get everybody to queue. So I say, starting at the front of the stage and going to the back of the room, I want you to organise yourself in years of experience. Okay, so you say, so if you've only had 2 months experience as an assistant, you're right at the front. At the back, we're going to have the ones who've been there forever. And we get about 10 people in before we reach 10 years. There are thousands of years of experience within that room. And very often there's a group at the end that are 30, 40, 50 years of experience. So please don't tell me that this is not a career anymore. This is something that people proudly have as a career. But what we have found more and more is that there is great frustration because within organisations, is very often only one level for assistants, or maybe two at best. And they're not understanding that if you have somebody working on reception who is brand new to the workforce and somebody who's working supporting the CEO, they're totally different roles. And very often you'll find that job descriptions are hugely outdated. And because there is that line on the bottom that says, and everything else we might like to throw at you, that's a kind of catch-all. So when you go into your performance review and you start saying, well, I've done way above what I should have done this year, they go, yes, but that falls into that. So therefore, how are we going to measure what it is that you do? Now, to me, it's just like every other role. Part of the reason I think HR don't understand it is because it's really difficult to measure it. So back in 2015, many of you know, but we helped WA Alliance, the World Administrators Alliance, to implement the Global Skills Matrix. And the Global Skills Matrix has 4 levels of assistant, plus the Chief of Staff over here as well, so that everybody understands what that is. But really, we're working a lot with organisations to understand what each level looks like, and the skills and the competencies. So I've just finished doing the competencies that run alongside those skills, and the tasks that can be expected at each level. And suddenly organisations are looking, going, oh, because at the middle of it, it's about understanding performance. It's about seeing what excellence looks like, because everybody deserves to be able to see what excellence looks like and to aspire to that. And it also gives them the opportunity to measure, which means that they can improve. And so HR are loving this, but it is really a journey. We've got HBR following BlackRock, who implemented it nearly 12 months ago now, to see what that looks like. And hopefully we'll have a case study coming out of the back of that. But we've had over 12,000 downloads of that thing now, and I spend most of my year talking to companies, and some of the biggest companies in the world. And I love that in the beginning, when I was saying, who's heard of the Global Skills Matrix, a few hands would tentatively go up. These days, most of the audience goes up. So, it's a free download. I'm sure Dan will share the resource just in case anybody hasn't seen it. But the exciting thing is that next year, starting in January, we're going to be doing a new piece of research research, which is more about the level 4 and the chief of staff and the overlap between the two, because I don't know whether you've seen, there's a new piece of research from LinkedIn, and in it, it's saying that the average assistant is doing 30% more strategic work within the last 3 years. And the Global Skills Matrix came out 3 years ago. So I'm very keen that we revisit it and we make sure that our thinking is absolutely correct, because I think the role has shifted slightly. And what I'm seeing, which is slightly aggravating me really, is a whole load of courses springing up where they're saying, oh, spend 3 days with us and you can get certified as a chief of staff, which clearly is nonsense. But what that's doing is devaluing the chief of staff role as it is. And it's also meaning that a level 4 assistant will no longer exist, which is the very strategic, very high powered assistant. So then it limits the career progression for assistants that want to stay in that lane. So I'm wanting to be very clear from the beginning of next year on what the difference is between the two, and to make sure that we've got the research to back that up. So lots coming, but it's exciting because I think companies are finally seeing that really there shouldn't be a glass ceiling or even a cement ceiling in some cases for assistants. Really, there should be a career progression just like everybody else, and that's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen you speak about the Global Skills Matrix, and even to me as an outsider, it was so impressive. And I think it tapped into that kind of, certainly during COVID and following those years, there seems to be societally a decline in our aspiration to be able to set goals the way that we used to kind of see a pathway forward the way that we used to. We kind of been forced back into survival mode. So actually amazing things like this can actually give people that kind of, especially at the end of a year into a new year, gives people that kind of sense of aspiration and progression again, where actually that kind of died up societally from the conversations I had anyway.
Totally. And I think for assistants this year, 2025 is probably the most important year to be going and setting goals if you've never done it before. You know, it's 70% of assistants don't do year end or have any kind of career plan. And really, I feel that moving into 2025, every business is looking at what the return on investment is from every member of staff. And for the first time, they're including the administrative professionals. And really having those clear goals and KPIs means that everybody is clear on what you are achieving and whether you manage to do that or not, what your aspirations are, where you're heading. You know, we very often say, what are you wanting to do in the next 5, 10 years? And assistants go, well, you know, I'm doing what I'm doing. I say, yeah, but if you don't know where you're heading or where you want to get to, how are you ever going to get there? You kind of need a map. So to sit and work out what your goals and KPIs are huge. And I wrote an article on that on LinkedIn quite recently, if you want to go and have a look. And there are also some links there, which you can follow if you're needing to set your own goals for 2025. There are some great articles there from Marie Herman and Julie Perrine on how you go about doing that, because I know that's a huge thing for assistants too. They say, well, where do I start?
Absolutely. I mean, we've wandered into the roles quite seamlessly. You'd imagine we do this professionally, right? Quite seamlessly gone into the world of strategy and strategic thinking. I'm thinking more so from the point of, as you've mentioned, the role of the assistant is not just a doer in that sense, that strategic input can increase your value and visibility and credibility. How does one go about that within an organization?
Really important to understand that assistants are very definitely doers. I mean, and that is core to the role. But being a strategic assistant is not necessarily getting into writing strategy. I think being a strategic assistant is twofold. Firstly, it's understanding the business well enough to be able to think ahead and to understand what the goals of the organization and of your executive are. And secondly, it's managing your executive strategically. So not just waiting to be told what to do, but seeing round corners and anticipating and really understanding what it is that they are needing to achieve so that you can help them to do that. But to me, I think strategic thinking is, oh goodness, it's becoming so core to the role. If you look at the way we're moving forwards, and I know that many of you are concerned about AI, and really AI is not going to be a problem. AI is going to just make your job even more supersonic, if that's possible. I think it's important to understand that the role is moving far more into that proactive, understanding goals, understanding KPIs, and supporting at that highest level. And you know, Anne Hyatt, who is the former EA to Jeff Bezos and who went on to be chief of staff at Google, she and I run courses a lot. And she said something quite interesting recently where she said to me, you know, every business is in a state of disruption right now. Every business, because of the technology. And if you're not going to be the disruptor, you're going to be the disrupted. Now, I think that sounds quite scary until you understand that the latest research from LinkedIn and Microsoft is saying that assistants lead the field when it comes to adoption of AI. As a job family, they're adopting it faster than anybody else. And I think that's really exciting. Of course they are, because most of their job is task-based and reactive. So if they're getting rid of all that boring stuff, then you can move into being a proper strategic business partner. And that really means supporting at a much higher level and getting into project management and into data analysis and into looking at how you're going to support goals that your executive has got in a more in-depth sort of way, maybe producing briefing documents. And what's so interesting is that 66% of leaders are saying that they now won't hire an EA without AI skills. It's really growing in importance. And within that report, it's also saying that 77% of leaders think that AI will accelerate an early career admin's growth. So all of that is really, really exciting. And in fact, there's a line in it which I really highlighted and I'm using a lot when in my strategic course, which is that they say in this report that for employees, AI is raising the bar and breaking the career ceiling. So many assistants feel stuck and don't know quite how they get to the next level. And to me, AI is actually going to be the tool that allows you to do that, because it takes you away from hours of doing expenses and doing minutes and sitting there doing writing hundreds of documents. It's going to do that, and then you can sit and play with it. But the stats around that are also really interesting. So to me, it moves you. It shifts you into a realm where you're understanding your executive far better, and the two of you are hitting the goals. I'm just going to clarify that quickly before I go on to communication skills, which is that it always used to be that the executive was up here and the assistant was down here. And we keep talking about collaboration. It's a buzzword. And actually, what that means is that what should happen now is that rather than the executive receiving a goal and going off on this journey to hit the goal and you going, how can I help? And them throwing things at you that you might use to help them, what should happen is that the two of you sit down, you understand what the goal is, you understand how long you've got to hit it, and you're bringing your expertise to the party so that the two of you are moving together in order to hit that goal together. So the success is both of yours. It's the two sides of the coin. So that means to me that you're becoming far more of a strategic business partner, and it makes the role far more interesting. And it also makes the return on investment far more measurable for the organisation.
Love that. Firstly, I'm loving the name drops as well. Amazing people that you work alongside, and they're probably saying the same about you right now as well. So there we go. It's a double-edged sword. Thank you so much for your insights on that. I mean, we are wandering again into the realms of communication skills. So the PA Forum, I run an event every year called Find Your Voice Live, where we look at the emotional storytelling side of speaking. So based on the premise that your ability to deliver any message with clarity and power and emotion will have an ultimately defining impact on your success by your own definition. You have taken that to whole new levels in terms of your speaking and the way that you communicate and raise awareness and create so much positive change. One of the things that does come out from the day, though, is that very often people get caught with communicating in confrontational situations. So maybe situations where they have to really clearly state an opinion. So I guess the question to you would be, in that situation, which could be sensitive or intense, how can you as an administrator have better conversations with people in high pressure environments?
I think so much of that boils down to how you see yourself, Nick. I think it's a really great question. But to me, most assistants will feel it's that kind of parent and child relationship for so many still. It's what I was talking about. It's that. And so if you've got somebody shouting at you, then you're going to feel like you're down here somewhere. It's a transactional analysis piece, isn't it? And transactional analysis is a framework that says that the way people respond to you is very often to the way that you behave. So there are parents and there are adults and there are children. And most assistants and executives traditionally had a parent and child relationship. But it isn't that anymore. It's an adult relationship. And so if you've got somebody shouting at you, that's about them. That isn't about you. And it's being confident enough and growing your confidence enough to know that what you are saying is valuable and correct. And to take a deep breath. I have been known, I have to say to people, thank you for that. I'm going to go now. When you've calmed down, we'll sit down and have a conversation.
I like that.
I think it's very I think keeping calm is one of our superpowers. If we're not feeling intimidated, and if we are feeling intimidated, it's understanding the reasoning behind that and working on that, probably. But yeah, it's hard, isn't it, when the role is changing so fast. But for so many executives, they're still seeing it as you belong to them or you're employed by them. I need to remind you, you're employed by the business, not by your executive. And you're employed for a very specific reason, and that isn't to be shouted at or to have things thrown at you. I've heard stories of assistants having things physically thrown at them in the past.
Wow.
Shocking.
That is shocking, absolutely. I mean, not necessarily throwings out of order generally, but that whole kind of ethos. And I'm so pleased that you explained that kind of structure and the partnership and being an employee of the company. Is that a kind of a generational hand-me-down from like traditional bastions of old business in that sense? How we used to view the role of the administrative professional?
I think it's such a big topic, and I think it used to be a male role. And very much the secretary was the keeper of secrets and worked in partnership and was a very valuable role. And it was World War II when the women took over from the men, and it was seen sadly very much as women's work. And we see traditionally that when you look at women's work, they're not paid as well, they're not valued as well, and it's becoming more and more professionalized, and I'm really excited about that. But with that has to come the assistants seeing themselves in a different way. Very often assistants say to me, you know, I want to be treated like a core part of the business. I want people to see me like they see everybody else and to see my skills as equally valuable and everything else. And I say, well, yes, okay, but A, do you really think about yourself that way? And are you presenting yourself that way? Because that's a huge step. And B, are you willing to do the work? Because that really does take work. You have to go and do some work on understanding your business, understanding your executive, understanding the goals, understanding how they communicate. It's a lot of work to do to get up to speed. And some assistants want to do that. And some, if they're absolutely honest, really don't, but still like to be part of the movement. So I think now, though, it's becoming critical. And the reason it's becoming critical is because those roles on the global skills matrix that are 1 and 2, which are the transactional, reactive roles of old, where you're told what to do and you go and do it, will go. And they'll go because if you can do something twice in the same way, it can be automated. And so AI is going to take them. And it's no good anymore going, well, I'd like to see somebody rearrange the calendar in 10 minutes and know everybody's preferences. There's machine learning, and it does learn, and it does do it very quickly. So, you know, I think for us, it's the human skills that we're going to really need to get involved with. And if you are looking at any of the press, or you're looking at the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, and you're seeing what they're saying are the skills of the future, it's all around critical thinking and complex problem solving and negotiation and service orientation and detail and, you know, kindness and love and all the things that businesses need to make people feel important. These are the skills of the future. And so these are things that assistants have in abundance. So understanding the value that you bring to the table, I think, is hugely important.
Absolutely. I think it's a good old-fashioned call for compassion.
Yes, for sure.
I'm intrigued on a personal note. Amuse me. Tell me briefly about your first public speaking experience.
Oh, gosh. Ugh. Well, no, I mean, I spoke in meetings a lot. So I've worked in publishing since I was 18.
Yeah.
Actually, probably my first public speaking experience was reading at church. I read in church since I was about 8 years old. So I did a lot of that. And actually I trained as a preacher, as a Methodist preacher later on.
Oh, wow.
So that kind of comes from that. But my first business public speaking experience in front of lots of people, I launched a local business awards, which was in where did it launch? Richmond upon Thames. And I stood up in front of 600 people, and I had a lectern in front of me and quite a short dress on, and I was very pleased I had the lectern in front of me because my knees were physically knocking together. And I am now, however many years on, and oh, it was terrible, Nick. I had a speech written out, and I was looking down, and I was looking up, and I was looking down, and I was losing my place, and oh God, it was horrible. It just awful. And later on, and I may have told you this story, but my dad was head of drama at the BBC. And after doing quite a lot of public speaking, I said to him, Dad, I really, really need to connect here because I'm being asked to do this more and more. And I really stressed. And he said, well, you have an amazing story to tell, so tell it with all the magic you would tell a 5-year-old a fairy story, and stop having words and put pictures on the screen. So that, for example, imagine you have a storybook in front of you where you're telling somebody the story of Cinderella. You know when you turn the page and the next picture comes up what the next part of the story is, and then you can tell it with magic. So I've done that ever since. You'll very rarely see that I have lots of words on a screen. It's usually a picture, and that's because it's reminding me what the next part of the story is. And yes,
Yeah.
there are bits of what I say where I'm repetitive, and obviously the themes are the same, but you're never going to get the same presentation twice from me because things are forever coming to mind. And as I'm learning things at conferences from other people, and as I'm reading stuff, I go, oh, and I saw this, that was so interesting. And that was, so you don't get tied up, and it's very freeing. I love it.
It is someone after my own heart. I love that. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for sharing that. I guess in terms of well-being and resilience, there's two things I really wanted to approach with you here. The first one is you do so much positive work to empower people. And also because you are so out there, visible, accessible, as you're kindly proving today, how do you also maintain your own well-being and resilience? Kind of, so what do you do to recharge, but also what advice would you give to people here so that they can look after their well-being and kind of build and boost resilience in their roles?
I don't know whether you know, but I know some of the people who are on this call do know. But in 2010, I burnt out, and I burnt out really quite badly.
Okay, no, I
I
didn't know
was
that.
Yeah, I was heading up a department of maybe 80 people globally, and it was a 94 million pound bottom line. And I was in the office at 7 in the morning and rarely home before 10 o'clock at night. 13 magazines, all the associated events. And between us, my husband and I have 7 kids. So, and they were all living with us. I got up one day, went to the office, sat and looked at the computer and just thought, I haven't got a clue what I meant to do today. It was like my brain had gone, if you are not going to stop, I'm going to stop you. And it was like it had wiped the disc clean. And it was terrifying, actually. I don't think I've ever been so scared. I don't remember getting home. I went to a doctor who signed me off for 5 weeks and gave me tablets. And I slept for about 5 weeks. And when I went to go back, they said, you obviously can't handle the pressure, so we're letting you go. So I went from a 6-figure salary to nothing overnight with all those kids and several of them in private school, and I was the main breadwinner. So it was quite an interesting time. And at that point, my husband said to me, that newsletter you've had forever, why don't you turn it into a magazine? You could do that from the kitchen table and we'll keep going with what we're doing. That was in autumn 2010, and I launched executive support in March 2011, and it was always meant to be me sitting at my kitchen table. And he says to me sometimes, you're exhausted. And I say, yes, but I don't have all the politics going on. And I recognize it. So because I'm my own boss, if I need to, I can have a morning in bed and sleep. Or at weekends, if I'm past it, I will go and see something beautiful. I walk and walk and walk. My office is 35 minutes from my home and it's straight down the seafront. And there's a reason for that. It's because I want to see something beautiful in the morning on the way to work. And very often I have worship songs actually in my ears as I'm walking down the seafront because it just makes me very calm and it means I can think about what I'm doing for the day. I believe my energy is a mission. I really, I pray a lot. And really, it's about food, it's about sleep, it's about faith, and it's about exercise. And I hate exercise with a passion, but I need it, you know. There's a reason why people who are top CEOs go to the gym every day, and it has as much to do with mental health as it does to do with physical health. So I think I just have a barometer. To start with, I got very scared. Every time I had an off day, I'd think, oh, here we go again. It's going to go horribly wrong. But 15 years on, it's just, I think, part of what makes me good on stage, because I do have empathy and I do understand when people are having a rough time. And I know that's the same for you, Nick, very much so, and you, Dan, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that as well. Truly appreciate that. Amazing candor. Okay, we're going to talk about one more thing before we come back to the room, because I think we have mentioned kind of AI throughout this session in a few different ways. So we will skip that. But the one I do want to mention before we go back to the ring for any questions is around collaboration and networking, the importance of having a network. And of course, you're speaking to the converted here in terms of the forum and everything else. However, how important is it to have networks and to collaborate and to, I guess, avoid seeing people as competition? Because sometimes that can be the biggest mindset to overcome, is when we see everybody as competition, we kind of see pound signs walking around, not potential collaborators.
You know, I really always feel that when we're focused on the mission, the money comes. I have one of our mission statements is the money is in the conversation. And very much my team know that, yes, of course, we broadcast marketing on occasion, but actually talking to people is what I'm interested in. And we've actually got three, and they tie into this very nicely. The second one is one profession, one voice. And that is because when I first started, there were pockets of people doing amazing things across the world, but none of them were talking to each other. And I figured that if we connected them all, it would make it far more powerful and that we would get stuff done far quicker. So my team know that where we can, we should be connecting people who we think are going to be useful to each other. And Dan will know, because very often he'll see people and go, they're amazing. Can you introduce me? And of course, I always introduce him. It's absolutely, you know, I'm always very happy to do that. And vice versa, actually, these days, he finds people that I go, they're amazing. So we share, you know. But the third one is changing lives one person at a time. And my team's very clear that every person we talk to should be feeling like we're the only person that we talk to today. So for me, at the heart of what we're doing is very much about building a network with people, sharing information. And I've watched over my career, which is now getting really quite long in the tooth. I think I started in business in 1987. And it's a lesson that you learn as you go, that really nobody knows enough to be able to do it on their own. You're only going to be able to do it by finding the people who are better than you at doing certain things and working with them to achieve it, especially if you're on the kind of global mission that I am. And I also watch the organizations that tend to do this and keep everything to themselves and say, you know, and they disappear quite quickly, because you can't work like that, particularly if you're in a profession like ours that needs transforming so desperately. Really, you need as many people on your side as possible. And the ones that flourish are the ones that say, of course, whatever it is you need, just come and that's one of my favorite phrases. People write and say, can you help me? And I say, whatever it is you need, because that's going to serve all of us, isn't it, in the end?
Absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much. So we will come back to the room now for any questions. Any parting wisdom from you, Lucy, before we end the recordings part of the session?
Parting wisdom, I think 2025 is going to be your year, but it's going to be your year if you understand that you need to really start thinking about this role in terms of being a strategic business partner and rather than helping. And that means starting off the year by asking your executive what their goals and KPIs are. What are your goals and key performance indicators and OKRs? Can't remember what OKR stands for, but I do know that KPIs and OKRs are very similar. It's just that KPIs are the things that are based on things your business is doing already, and OKRs is based on what your business is wanting to do in the future. And they've separated the two because they were setting them all as KPIs, and then people weren't hitting them because some of the future stuff didn't happen because of things that weren't necessarily down to that person. Thank you so much, Emma Williams, of objectives and key results. I was just having a senior moment there and couldn't remember for a second. So yes, one is based on things that are happening now, one is based on things that are happening in the future. But if you know what they are from your executive, then you know how to help them to get there. And if you're doing that, then you're always going to be a hero. So what are the goals? What are the KPIs and OKRs? What are they trying to achieve? And what does success look like for them this year? Start the year off with that, then you can fix what it is that you're going to do to support them. And the other thing I would say is maybe start the year off with a refresh. If there are things that you really want to be doing in 2025 that you weren't in 2024, take 3 of them, no more than 3, because you're going to confuse them and they're going to confuse you. Go into that meeting at the beginning of the year and say, here are some additional responsibilities I'd like to take on. Not more work, just working differently. Okay, here are some things I'd like to change for 2025. And once you've done that, then you just have to deliver those 3 things, because when you deliver them immaculately, you're going to build trust, and then they're going to allow you to shift it a little bit more. So you can take on maybe another 3 things. That's how you change the role, 3 things at a time, piece by piece, do it immaculately, build the trust, then you can go back and ask to do something else in a slightly different way.
Wonderful. Love that, Lucy. Thank you so much. And a big thank you to Lucy for joining me here today. We're going to come back to the live room for any questions now. But as always, if you have any questions for myself or my guest, Lucy, today, I'll give you a place to reach us in a second. But big round of applause for Lucy. Woo!
Yeah, so thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. For those of you watching the recording back, we're just going to stop that now just so we can take some questions. But thanks so much for watching. Thank you
And
so
if you
much
do
to
have any
Lucy and
questions,
Nick.
oh, sorry. If you do have any questions, it's nick@nickelston.com. I'm on LinkedIn and also have the podcast. And that's me. So big thank you to Dan and for the forum for allowing me to be the host for these sessions for this year. And I look forward to coming back to you in January.
Amazing.